What's up, Zach here, and today I've got the all-new Giannis Immortality 4, and it is not a stretch to say these are just a better shoe than the Freak 6. Let's get into why. Now, number one, you gotta take into consideration value for your money. The Immortality line is quite a bit less expensive than the Freak line, even when they both go on sale. So just make sure you keep that in mind throughout the video. Now, starting off in the uppers, number one, you got this foam-backed paneling here in the rear foot. Actually is pretty substantial, and that ankle collar comes up pretty darn high. And even off the jump, the heel slippage on the Immortality 4s, really none to speak of. I mean, very minimal at the beginning, and then, after a few times wearing them, absolutely zero. The lockdown on these things, even without a runner's knot, is really phenomenal. Number one, because the anterior portion of the ankle collar, right, like in the front of your ankle, it comes up to a pretty high peak, so you do get a pretty nice overlapping of your ankle, almost like the LeBron 19 had with those like bat wings that went over your anterior ankle. Now, going into the tongue, it's not the most padded thing on the planet, but it does breathe exceptionally well. If you look at this thing on the breathability test, it is kind of a Jekyll and Hyde. It does heat up 116.6 degrees, which is much more than a lot of other Nike shoes we've seen in the basketball space, which some of them don't even get to 100 degrees Fahrenheit on that breathability test. But when you look at the breathability mapping, that's where it really tells the tale. Really, fog is only getting out of that tongue, really nothing in the forefoot. But with that, you do get a lot of really substantial material going all the way around the midfoot, around the toe box of the shoe, and then going all the way up that meets that foam backing. That is a very strong, tight backed, woven upper layer. And then you do get a decent amount of padding under that. That Nike swoosh is stitched in there pretty good. So, the foxing reinforcing elements on this are really not bad at all. You go into the upper durability test on these things, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper, and the burr does not make it through the drag guard. Now, it does make it through the exposed foam, and it just pummels through that exposed foam. So these are gonna start to look pretty weird if you drag or slide on really gritty outdoor courts, but just showing the build quality of these, that drag guard actually really is fantastic. And on this one, you do have quasi outrigger lace eyelets. I'm not the biggest fan of these in the world, but they are very, very strong on these. They are reinforced to the hilt pretty good. So as you can see, even with the the lines that are stitched around that upper, over top of that woven backed upper, they're really substantial padding in the rear foot. They're really aggressive gusset on the tongue too on these things on the underside. Really, the uppers in these things are made for battle. You even get a double thick heel counter on these things too. And it's double thick more on its superior end, not inferiorly, right? A lot of times on these ones, the double thickness actually is lower in the heel counter, which this one's a little higher, which I thought was pretty interesting. I didn't notice a huge difference in terms of where they put that thickness, right? Where they put more material. But your heel does sink into the shoe probably a little bit better on that, so maybe that's where a little bit more of that less heel slippage came into play. So that could be a little minor difference in there too, but like I said, all in all, the uppers of these, honestly, they come to play. But getting into the midsole teardown, oh my God. Nike just, they've gotta be trolling us at this point. Oh my God, there's a shank in this one. You gotta be kidding me. Yeah, so you get a top-loaded, pretty substantial plastic shank in these things, which is just, why, right? This is the budget model. Why is there one in here and not in the Honest? I understand that Giannis doesn't necessarily need it, right? He's getting new shoes all the time, whenever he feels like it. He's probably got a really nice pair of custom orthotics in there, and maybe he likes his orthotics a little bit stiffer, so he doesn't need the shoe to be as, protective. But if you're selling it to the public, people that want to buy that shoe, which, those shoes are not cheap to begin with, and somebody wants that shoe to last, the duration, really, why does this one have the substantial shank in it for so much less money? You do get an entire bed of Renew foam, which, yeah, Renew foam isn't as durable as some of other Nike's foams, right? And over time, it can get less and less responsive from what I've noticed. However, while the shoe is newer, right? Not even new, but kind of at least, to halfway through the shoe's life, Renew foam to me, number one, feels decently bottom light, but also pretty springy, pretty bouncy. Like, I like Renew foam. And with the shank in this, it's gonna protect that Renew foam, more and more versus a shoe like the Freak 6, where in the Freak 6, yeah, it has a little bit more of a premium, more elastic, EVA in there. But look at the bounce height test on this thing, 36 centimeters in the rear foot, 37 in the forefoot. And that's, in the upper level of the mid-range on that test. So Number one, you're getting, some pop out of these shoes. You're getting a shank that's protecting them. And getting into the outsole tread, pretty similar to the Immortality 3s. It is more of just really long, linear, broken up treads. It does get pretty broken up here in the forefoot, a little bit more grabbing power. It is a full length tread pattern, which is nice. On the grip test ramp, doesn't slip till 41 degrees, which is pretty good. And then you look at it there on the viewing box as well. This rubber does sway a little bit. There is some movement there. The durometer actually comes in a little bit higher on these. Now, the one thing is, look at this thing on the outsole durability test, I should say, 10 seconds highest grit sandpaper. Almost a millimeter of damage on these things. What I would say is although the durometer is high enough for outdoor courts, and if you don't really produce a lot of friction, if you don't drag and slide a lot, then I think that they would be okay. Because this rubber is so thin and narrow, there's just nothing protecting it, right? So if you produce a lot of friction at all, if you have a little more shuffling footwork, right, or like I said, you come to screeching halts, it's just gonna start to meld into each other. There's like I said, there's not a lot to protect it. So for more dancing footwork, right, light on your feet footwork, I think they're okay. But for, a little bit more aggressive footwork, maybe not. Now, you look at these things on the speed ratio. They come in at a 2.57, a shank score of 0.2, bumps these up to a 2.77. Actually, I think that's where they belong. I think they're pretty speedy, quick shoes. Number one, the stopping power in them, I'd say the stopping power is pretty decent. The flange comes to a pretty big point, but it is a narrow flange, right? So if you've got a really big elephant type foot like I do, then that flange kind of, in your mind becomes smaller and smaller because it comes to such a point, right? It's not as broad. But even for me, I never really felt unstable. I did feel myself kind of pushing through the uppers a little bit, kind of doing the stopping tests with these. So if you're not a super high volume foot, that flange is going to be really, really nice for stopping power. The higher and higher volume of a foot you are, kind of, at least in your mind, it's kind of inverse correlated with the flange. It almost just feels like it's getting a little bit smaller. These shoes do pick up a little bit of dust. I will say that the initial grip on these is phenomenal. Pick up a little bit of dust, and they become a little bit more forgiving. And then, with a quick wipe down, they all of a sudden, the grip comes back really, really well. And because these linear patterns of tread are oriented perpendicular to your plane of motion, if you're stopping on the side, you do get, a lot of grabbing power on these, especially if you can just wipe them down. So all in all, in terms of speed and stopping power, if you're the right foot for these, yeah, they're absolutely fantastic. But getting into the fit of the Immortality 4, this one is a little bit different than the Freak 6. There's so much backing, right, and reinforcing in the uppers, right? So they don't break in as well as some more buttery shoes for sure. They do have a 14-degree inflare, which is kind of getting up there. It doesn't look like much from the top of the shoe, but from the bottom where we actually measure it, yeah, it is kind of getting up there. They do come in at 28.9 centimeters of length, 9.1 centimeters of metatarsal width, 10 centimeters of digital width or toe box width, and then a 28-degree toe box taper. When I first had them on and I wasn't swelling yet in them, they were okay. But as soon as, the humidity started getting my foot, like I said, it's been in the 90s this week and I've had the garage door open when I've been playing. As soon as the humidity starts getting in there and you start sweating a lot and swelling a lot, yeah, they're a little bit more unforgiving. At the gym where it's a little bit more climate controlled that I'm in, wasn't as much of a problem until later and later on. So I'd say narrow medium foot, it's great, go true to size. I think it's fantastic. A 2E, I probably would be going up a half size on these. A 4E, I think you can go up one size, but at that point, you're gonna start introducing probably a little bit of heel slippage because that ankle collar isn't gonna line up as well. If you're a long-toed 4E or a long-footed 4E, then I think you're fine going up that one size, but that's really the only group in these, that 4E group, that just might have a little bit of problems getting a really nice lockdown on these things. In terms of the snake bitten foot, yeah, like I said, they do have a shank, right? So they're a little bit more stable in terms of support, right? In terms of medial support. But I still would say an orthotic in these is probably the way to go. Because that Renew foam, like I said, it feels great at first, but as it gets compressed and as you start playing on it more and more, it's just not, the break-in profile and the longevity of it just isn't as good as some more of Nike's premium foams. So even a more low-profile orthotic in these, or even these, something like the Power Step Bridge, like where they're a little bit more of like a foamy orthotic on the bottom, it has a little bit more like resilient foam in them. I think that's kind of the best play for these ones. I'll leave them linked in the description below. They did something to give you a little bit more resilience over the lifetime of the shoe, and if you can do that, then honestly, like I said, the durability profile of that midsole and of that shoe, like I said, it just goes up and up and up, especially if you're playing with them on indoor courts. But getting into the all-important playability, the Immortality 4s, I will say the Freak 6s do feel a little bit more buttery underfoot, right? You get a little bit more court feel with them underfoot. It's also because of the profile of the midsole. I would say the Immortality 4s, they're, like I said, they feel bottom light on your feet. They are very like quick, kind of speedy, little nimble shoes. They play a lot like the Immortality 3s, let's be honest. It's a very similar setup. So I would say in these ones, like I said, the containment's a little better than the 3s. And like I said, it depends on your foot type. Like I said, if you're not as high volume of a foot type and you're not someone like me who's got a ton of weight coming down on the shoe, right? A little bit more bumbling footwork like I have, a little more goofy footwork like I have. But if you're somebody with, very precise footwork, lighter on their feet, yeah, I mean, these things are really easy just to kind of, bounce around, and especially for step backs, trying to create space for yourself going through cones, right? If you're taking lessons, right? Like these were fantastic doing stuff like that, right? Real like kind of more of like an agility type shoe. And although getting up for layup after layup after layup, they don't give you a ton of launch assist, right? They don't feel like crazy pogo sticks. They definitely feel like they have structure underneath of them. And like I said, if you put an orthotic in them, that, like I said, that profile goes up and up and up. So in my estimation, yeah, the Immortality 4s in almost every way besides court feel are better than the Freak 6s, especially for the money. And at least in the comments that I've seen in the Immortality 3s, so many people loved that shoe. That was such like a beloved shoe. And to Nike's credit, they really just reinforced the 3s. That's basically all they did in these things. Just took the heel slippage down a little bit, reinforced the uppers a little bit, and basically threw it back out on the market, which to me I think is great, right? It's a product that people like, that's affordable. And like I said, as these go down, they're going to start to go on sale too. And as we all know, a budget shoe on sale is cheaper than the flagship on sale still, even if they're both going on sale. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. I know I just did the Freak 6, and I'll leave that video linked up above, and make sure you subscribe down below. Respect, Jarbor, and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.